In our parasha, the Torah speaks about social responsibility, social welfare, how a Jew has to take care of other people. And there are many different levels. The Torah speaks about Ma'aser. Ma'aser is the tithe. There was the tribe of Levi, and the tribe of Levi did not have any agricultural land in Israel. They didn't have their own portion, their own territory. They were given cities to live in. But the Levium were the ones who provided spiritual sustenance to the Jewish people. They taught them Torah. They worked in the temple. And therefore the Torah says, Aser Ta'aseh, you have to make sure to give them tithes. Then, of course, the Torah speaks also about the different gifts to the poor. There's payah, there's the corner of the field. There are the gleanings that fall while you are harvesting the crops. And then the Torah speaks about the mitzvah of tzedakah, of charity. And out there in the general world, people look upon charity as a nice thing to do. It's good to be charitable. But in Jewish law, charity is not something that is nice to do. Charity is an obligation. It is something that we have to do. And the Torah speaks about it in a very clear way. And it says that when you have a poor person in your midst, you have to support that poor person. You have to make sure that they have what to survive on. Dei machsoro asher yechsalo. You have to make up whatever they are lacking. And the Talmud makes it clear. What does it mean you have to make up whatever they're lacking? If that person doesn't have food, you have to provide them with food. If they don't have clothing, you have to provide them with clothing. If they don't have accommodation, you have to provide them with accommodation. If the person is not yet married, you have to find them a spouse and you have to pay for the wedding. You have to do all of these things. This is your obligation of charity. Of course, the question is, well, how do you practically go about doing it? Somebody knocks on your door, they look down and out, and you open the door and you say, yes, how can I help you? And the person says, well, look, I don't have food, I don't have clothes, I don't have a house, and I need to get married. Can you please help me out? Well, the Torah says that you have to provide for all of their needs, but you as an individual, unless you're very, very wealthy, how are you going to be able to do it? And therefore the Code of Jewish Law says that obligation of making sure that the poor is provided for is really a communal obligation. No one individual can make sure that all of the needs of the poor are met. So then, what is the obligation of the individual? And here our sages said as follows, that each individual must give charity according to what they can afford. But they put certain basic minimums. And I wouldn't say it's the minimum, but the basic amount that each and every Jew should give is what's called maaser, a tenth. When you get paid your salary, after taxes of course, you take 10% of that and you dedicate it to charity. What many people do is they actually set up a separate account and then they'll take 10% and they'll put it in that charitable account, and from that charitable account they will make all of their donations. That is called maaser. That is called giving a tithe. If you give less, you certainly do fulfill your mitzvah of giving charity. And if you give more, for sure you fulfill your mitzvah of giving charity. In fact, the Talmud says that a person shouldn't give more than 20%, because if he starts giving more, he himself may now become impoverished. So 20% is usually the cutoff unless somebody is very, very wealthy. But the average Jew should give 10%. And it was the Vilna Gaon who said a most fascinating thing. He said that if every person would give 10% of their wealth to charity, there would be no more poverty in the world. It would all be taken account of. It's just that many people in the general community don't give charity at all. Or if they give charity, they just give a small amount, because for them it's a nice thing to do. But for a Jew, it's an obligation. This is something that you have to do. Now, to give of your money is very hard. Suddenly you have to give up 10%. You could be doing something else with that 10%. You could be investing it. You could be using it for your children's education. So the Torah begins, when it speaks about the tithe, it says, aser ta'aser, which means you shall surely tithe. But we know that the Torah has no nekudot. It has no vowels. And therefore you could read it as follows. Aser tit asher, which means give a tithe and you shall become rich. And the sages commented that if you give your charity, Hashem will care for you. And in fact, the Code of Jewish Law, when it begins the laws of charity, it makes a promise. And it's very rare that a legal book should make any type of promises. But the legal book, the Shulchan Aruch, when it begins the laws of charity, says, give charity. And be generous when you give charity, because no bad thing ever came to a person from giving charity. I remember growing up in my community. It was a very, very generous family, and there was a prize every year. There was a prize called the Million X. This is where people paid about 1,000 rand to enter, and if they won, they would win R1 million. R1 million in those days was an enormous amount of money. And there was a particular family who paid their R1,000 ticket, and they won. They won the R1,000,000. They got R1,000,000 back. And everybody was grumbling in the community, oh, they don't really need it, and this, that, and the other. But I saw it in a different light. They gave charity, and they gave charity generously and with a good eye, and Hashem recompensed them and gave it back. And it's something that you see all of the time, that those people who are generous do not lose. In fact, they gain great honor and respect in the eyes of the community. And those people who have a lot of money and don't give, they are the ones that people look down upon. So therefore, when you get money, when you receive money, give it generously. Hashem will take care of you. If you take care of His creatures, of His people, He will take care of you. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.